The conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter had begun in November 2020 and came closer on December 10th, 2020. This is when both planets were in 1 degree of each other. In astrology, every astrologer measures connections by different orbs, which are degrees of separation, but most will use over 3 degrees for planets. This means that Jupiter and Saturn will be in conjunction together for several months. The assessment of the Great Conjunction in this video is done using Western astrology, using the tropical system, a system that is measured not by the stars, but rather by the seasons, through the lens of the Northern Hemisphere. If you are in the Southern Hemisphere, this still applies to you. However, when we talk about the length of day, you will be experiencing the opposite length. For the winter solstice is the summer solstice in the Southern Hemisphere, and it is marked by the longest day of the year for the South. There is much debate between tropical and sidereal systems, but I hope you enjoy the beauty of the symmetry and of its interpretation. This cannot be done using the sidereal system, as we are talking about daylight in this instance. First, the astronomy, as online there is much discussion regarding this transit, and what seems like a bit of confusion between astrological and astronomical significance of it. The conjunction is happening at 0 degrees of Aquarius. We can talk about the significance of this degree as well as the other astrological features throughout and at the end of the video. The astronomy of this connection is Jupiter and Saturn are closer at this time than they have been since 1623 and 1563. The conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn happens every 20 years, but often it is not too close, so this current conjunction is rare. Those previous conjunctions were studied by Johannes Kepler, a famous astronomer from the 17th century, but were not observable because of their proximity to the Sun. However, the last visible conjunction of a similar proximity happened in 1226, that's 800 years ago. We will discuss those time periods in a little bit. Kepler believed that the conjunction may have been the nativity star from Christian theology. He wasn't correct. The visible distance of 6 arc minutes in 2020's conjunction is much closer than that of the conjunctions when Jesus may have been born. Even if it was close, it would still appear more like a binary star system than one entity. In fact, the next time inoculation will happen is 7541. Inoculation is when Saturn will be hidden completely behind Jupiter, appearing as one object. The last oculation happened in 6875 BCE, almost 7,000 years before Jesus was born. To spark your imagination, a conjunction did happen when Herod was king, a time listed in scriptures as the time of Jesus' birth. I will tell you the exact date of this conjunction at the end of the video. Let's take a break from Saturn and Jupiter and come back to the astrology of the conjunction in a little bit. I did 2 separate videos describing the transit of each planet in Aquarius. You can find those linked in the description and at the end of the video. The ancient Egyptian sun god Ra daily entered the underworld after his journey across the sky ended at sunset. Every night Ra would travel into the underworld called the Duat, where he was met by Set, the god of war. Set would protect Ra and defeat the snake Aptep before Ra emerged again. This snake, to the Egyptians, represented chaos and disorder, or some form of evil. The Egyptians believed that this was the cornerstone experience of life, and that it was responsible to make order in chaos. The old god Ra made his journey daily to assure that the world would maintain its order and stability. The overcoming of chaos by the light of God is the cornerstone of winter solstice practices. The winter solstice is the shortest day of the year from the perspective of the Northern Hemisphere, where Western astrology was developed and around which much astrology is based. In the northern perspective, the sun reaches the Tropic of Capricorn, that is the latitude 23 degrees, 26 minutes, 22 seconds, south of the equator. When the sun reaches this position caused by the tilt of the earth, there will be less daytime in relation to night. Ancient people felt intuitively that this was a special day, and because of this, there were many religious beliefs that emerged from those observations. On December 21st, the sun is at its lowest point and stays observably stationed for a period of 3 days in the darkness of the night, before beginning to move again and gaining daylight. The moment that this emergence happens is December 25th. As the visible night becomes a little shorter, while the day becomes a little brighter. This observable fact may have been the metaphorical influence on the parable of the resurrection of Christ in the Bible. Ancient Jewish texts describe the pagan festivals called Saturn, which occurred 8 days before the winter solstice, with a festival called Kalenda and culminating with January's beginning. In fact, Kalenda holiday once celebrated as a veneration to Adam's observance of the longer day, later becoming a pagan holiday. The holiday was initially Judeo-Christian, became pagan, and then transformed in part into Christian Christmas, while adopting belief systems from other religions and ancient cults as well. Romans called this time Saturnalia, the holiday practiced in the same part of the year. This holiday of worshiping the god Saturn had its roots in ancient Athenian midsummer festival called Cronia, in celebration of Cronus. During Cronia, classism was abolished, and people who were in servitude could celebrate with their masters. Cronus was an agrarian god, and over time and in different locations held various powers. This was common for ancient gods to do. In the Roman version, celebrated over the winter solstice, candles were lit in honor of Saturn to bring warmth and light to the chaos of the long night, just like Ra and just like Christ. Cronus is the old god of the Greeks. Ra is the old god of the Egyptians, and Saturn is the old god to the Romans. They are not exactly the same, but their stories overlap often. In fact, Saturn's early counterpart was the god Enki of Sumeria, a god who governed world order and was depicted as half goat, half fish, associated with the sign of Capricorn. This may be the association of the Tropic of Capricorn with Saturn. In the Greek parable, a half goat, half fish named Amalthea nursed Zeus when Cronus tried to eat him. A Capricorn client said to me recently that he feels bad for being a Capricorn, but I told him that is the most blessed sign, as it welcomes in the light of day from the depths of the darkness. Furthermore, the Sumerian god Utu is the god that traveled in the sky, just like Ra, and restored order by fighting with monsters at night. Jupiter and Zeus are associated with Utu as well because he was the god of justice and order. His main emblem was the sun disk, signaling his topmost rank. Utu was celebrated in Sumeria since 3500 BC, when the first records were kept. It's important to remember that each region had their own interpretation of the gods, their powers, and traditions. However, the main quality was that he disbanded chaos, just like Ra did with Apep, and brought light to the world. There were other gods tied to these early images of the sun god Utu, Helios in Greece and Sol in Rome. However, their functions were different than that of Utu, and although they were both sun gods as well, their presence was much less concrete and described as a conflation of several traditions. The winter solstice has a deep tradition of light overcoming darkness, and it is very much similar to a powerful new moon. Imagine the winter solstice as a giant mirror of light. The degrees from each side measure equally the amount of light that the transits are receiving on either side. The winter solstice is the quiet of the night, and within the quiet, fewer things are happening, as the world is sleeping. Because there is less light, more sleep, less noise, it is easier to see the shift that certain transits are expressing. If we count the conjunction the winter solstice, December 21st, 2020 at 2:03 a.m. PDT, as a snapshot of some burst of energy, we can deduce energetic frequencies of several transits. The transit in Capricorn and Aquarius will complete something when the Sun transits in conjunction to them. This event started at the dates given on the chart. The influences are important for your personal experience as well as world events. Pluto. An event started in December 14th, 1997 to do with the power and institutions. That event will finally finish on January 13th, 2021, and light will be brought to it. This means that the truth will come out or an obstacle will be removed. Mercury. This has already been resolved at the time of posting. Something that had begun on December 20th regarding the signing of documents or important communications would have already resolved by December 21st. The more important transits are Jupiter and Saturn. With respect to Jupiter, something had begun on November 5th, 2018. It may have been a process of addressing injustice in your life or blockages. These blocks are free now, and the cycle will complete on January 20th, 2021. Regarding Saturn, something to do with the way your life is organized began on December 17th, 2014. This too will see its resolution on January 20th, 2021. When the Sun forms conjunctions to Saturn and Jupiter this year, 2021, you will see the positive outcomes of both of these transits. Sun will be with Saturn on January 23rd, 2021, and Sun will be with Jupiter on January 28th, 2021. Get ready for blessings. Regarding the transits in Sagittarius, Venus will resolve a love issue for you by January 26, 2021, and Juno will resolve a marriage problem by January 30th, 2021, especially if there are things you need to learn or understand. So now that we've done some astrology, looked back at the context of the winter solstice, and hopefully gain some understanding of the astronomy of this event, let's look at the astrological significance of the conjunction in Aquarius. The conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter happens almost every 20 years. It follows a distinctive pattern of conjoining at 120-degree angles to each other. They will connect in the signs of the same element for a period of 200 years and gently drift into the next triad. For the last 200 years, they have been connecting in the earth element signs, and as of 1981, this drift is causing them to begin forming these connections in the air signs. Every time that these signs switch elemental triad, they are joining in. There are some years in which the conjunction happens in between the elements they are moving away from and into. For example, as mentioned in the last 40 years, the conjunction happened in Libra in 1981 and then Taurus in 2001, and now again conjunctions between the signs of Capricorn and Aquarius. There is still one instance of Earth element conjunction in the sign of Taurus and Gemini in 2060. And after that, the conjunction will happen exclusively in the air signs. There's been a bit of confusion between the proximity of the conjunction and these astrological facts. as the fact that the 2060 conjunction is still partly in Taurus has been overlooked. This does change the meaning of the conjunction in 2020 because it is neither the closest, as per the astronomy, nor the last of the Earth conjunctions we'll be facing in the next few rounds. In fact, in 2080, Saturn and Jupiter will form an even closer conjunction. That's something to look forward to. The more auspicious geometry of this event is the fact that it happened and is happening until January 11, 2021, at the same time as the Sun transitions through the duat and emerges a new energy in Capricorn. Furthermore, another lovely aspect to this energy is that this happens at 0 degrees Aquarius, which as the first degree is the beginning of a whole new cycle of energy that lasts for the next 2.5 years that will be extended even further because of Pluto's transit in Aquarius that lasts between 2024 and 2045. Essentially, Aquarius will be the focal point for much astrology in the upcoming 25 years, and with that, our entire world society will take on these qualities. These qualities are that of humanitarianism, technological advancement, social progress, luck, exponential growth, and advances in learning and education. Before we finish, I would like to have a quick look at some astrology of the past. Upon reviewing the details and the dates, I noticed 3 major patterns. If you get a little nervous talking about world events, please skip this part of the video. This is your trigger warning. Do you remember the question I mentioned at the beginning of the video about what year may be the actual date of birth of Christ? So from biblical scriptures, we know that Jesus was born when Herod was king. This is a commonly agreed upon time frame given written information. The only possible date of this event is between 6 BC and 4 BC. And the only time that this conjunction happened around them was 7 BC, on December 25th. This is the only date that aligns with the ministry of Jesus. However, there are some interesting observations suggesting Jesus was born during the celebration of Sukkot. However, this wouldn't have been under this particular conjunction. Sukkot is celebrated at the end of September or in the first 2 weeks of October most years. So now that everyone who's squeamish has gone, the years in which the conjunction happened in the air signs is 404 to 186 BCE, that's before the Common Era, 386 to 604 CE, that's the Common Era, and 1104 to 1432 CE. These dates are loaded with history. But to make it easier to see, I have identified 3 general categories for you. First, plagues and pandemics. The earlier range did not have a plague during it that deemed sizable. However, it did begin with the completion of the Athenian plague that was one of the harshest in early history. The end of classical antiquity time, 386 to 604 AD, did have the onset of the bubonic plague that ravaged Europe. The same plague emerged during 1104 to 1432 and was called the Black Death. Another plague started in 664 in the British Isles. In fact, it coincided with the solar eclipse. That plague lasted for 25 years. This doesn't mean we are in such times, but there's some kind of energy at the end of Capricorn and beginning of Aquarius where the transits have been for the last year. That resonates with the large health scares. Be thankful for science and its ability to help us mitigate the cost of human life, because in previous times that was lacking. Some of these previous plagues killed 100 million people. The second observation is the rise and fall of truly great empires through these times. The most famous is the rise of Muhammad and the beginning of the faith of Islam in 570 AD. Germanic Visigoths dominated Europe in the same time period. Rome fell at this time as well. Furthermore, in the 13th century, the Mongol Empire rose at the leadership of Genghis Khan. Other empires rose in China and India that pushed their reach faster and further than ever before. In the early air transits, Alexander the Great established his empire. These empires rose and fell within the time frame of 200 years. However, all of their legacies are still revered. The Chinese Han Empire grew to prominence in 221 BC and maintained its power until 1912 CE, so that was the Common Era. Of course, Islam is still running strong and is a religion and not just an empire. The third observation is that education and science rose to new levels, particularly the establishment of many important universities in England, Germany, and France. Significant manuscripts were written, such as Dante's Divine Comedy in 1310. There were also unions formed in the way of guilds, as well as advances in civil law that governed the lawfulness between subjects based on principles of civility. During this time, there was also the first limitations to the power of the king. In earlier time periods before the Common Era, 404 to 186, both Socrates and Aristotle were born, lived, and died. Paper was created in China in 200 BCE, and advancements were achieved in the field of atomic theory and geometry. In Mexico, the largest pyramid on Earth was built in 200 BCE, called the Pyramid of Cholula, taller than the Great Pyramid of Giza by 91.5 meters. We are beginning an interesting time, and I hope that we get much more good than bad. Expect changes and transformations. Those of you who enjoy learning will thrive, and those of you who are ready to conquer the world, this transit will make your ascent to power faster and more effective. I grew up in post-rubella, Spanish flu, and measles days. Chickenpox was a common occurrence. In fact, children were exposed to it to build up natural immunity while young. I remember my grandmother telling me over and over again, wash your hands and mind your cleanliness. I feel at this time this is the best advice I can give. Be sanitary and hygienic, and choose responsibly over indulgence. Fire signs and air signs will find these transits the most harmonious, while earth signs will find this energy not in alignment with the earth material element. People who have earth element placements, Virgo, Taurus, Capricorn, will do well if they have some other placement in air or fire. Water signs, Pisces, Cancer, and Scorpio, will also find this energy impersonal and fast-moving. However, their natural attunement to emotions and love will in some ways help them to feel more grounded in the world than all the other signs. In short, expect this transit to bring lots of good into this world and support higher principles and ideals such as education and fairness between people, while downplaying performative dramatics. Thanks for your time.